Napa know-how.
The Napa guy knows not to judge a man by his car's multicolored paint job or absence of modern gadgetry. Who cares if it's technically old enough to vote and the windows are powered by the strength of your left arm? Your monthly payment is zero, and it'll stay that way. Because with over 500,000 parts and a little Napa know-how, you can keep anything on the road. She may not be pretty, but she's all yours. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. You've reached Venus Unplugged, and this is your host, Llorraine Neithardt. And what we're doing here is we are working with all and exploring all aspects. Well, we probably can't do all because Venus is infinite, aspects of the archetypal Venus. And what we've been doing is for the last 19 sessions, actually, is working with the symbols that live in the tarot cards, the major trumps. Now, how we're using them here is not for divination, although one could pick a card for the day, but to use them as a form of meditation, as a talisman, or let's say we're going to be working with the Sun card today. So let's say you need that feeling of the divine child, who has a connection with the universe and yet is here with the rest of us. And so we would look at that card or carry that card, or let's say you're depressed and you need the inspiration of the sun, bright and sunny and Sundays. We look at that card. So you can work with this many, many different ways. You just may notice, as I said, you can Pinterest. I'm going mad on Pinterest and slightly obsessed with all these beautiful images that come up. And the ones that attract me are the ones that evoke an image inside of me. I respond. My moon responds to it. My unconscious, my psyche. Okay, and others, which are quite beautiful in and of themselves, but leaves me flat. So that's how you can pick you pick what you like. Now, last week we worked with the moon, and what's that about? Is that when we're in the state of or in being influenced by the symbols, the images. Now, remember, images are real. Imagination is real. It's not fantasy. An active imagination is when we want to provoke a shift in consciousness, so we have a dialogue with the opposites. So let's say we have a dialogue with the sun and the moon. So you can put up both of those tarot cards, and so what would they be saying to one another? They're actually a reflection of one another, but, the sun energy and moon energy, very, very different. So with the moon, we realize that, each child, well, I suppose that's true also, each trial is designed to make you forget your past views or your past values, the way you were conditioned to believe, and at the moon, you release your memory, and you let go of the conditioned reactions of the past. And you learn to walk in the earth in a new way. So that, and many, many other things. As I said, we are just touching on these images and what we can meditate on these and spend a lifetime. When I first started tarot, and the reason I started that was because clients were getting too concerned, like, where was I getting this information from? It's like, well, then I'd be a scientist and not a mystic if I could understand that. So I thought, well, I had, my basics with astrology, so I had a sense of how to communicate to this person. But then I began with, and I said, well, let me just start working with these images. Now, of course, the first deck that I got was the Aleister Crowley deck. And I was playing with them and observing them and looking, and I got a migraine headache that lasted 3 days because the intensity of the images, and I didn't know who Crowley was. It was that they were just gorgeous. So they do, and there's probably thousands of decks now. All right, so we can pick a deck, as I said, or somebody. It's best if somebody gifts you a deck of cards, so you can, let friends know. Okay, send me a deck of cards, and I'd be very happy. So we're working with the sun, the bright sun, the lover of the moon. So when the sun begins to show, this film is probably 20 years old. It's called Lady Hawk. It's an astounding film. It's actually a teaching film, about each character in the film is really kind of represents a planet, but a curse is put on the knight and the fair lady, and so he is a knight by day and a wolf by night, and she is a hawk by day and the lady by night, and the only time they can meet is at dawn, that 1 second, and they become human, and they remember their love, and then they spend the day in this state of opposites. And of course, this is hilarious. Guess what? He is the Gemini. He's the thief and the go-between, these kind of states of consciousness. So it's a wonderful film to watch and to see how, in the cardinal or the religious guy is, he's really kind of just evil, all right, just misusing. So it's a very, very interesting film. So when you are in a process, which is what the Sun card opens us to, when you're in a process of spiritual realization, this is the truest love possible. And there's a divine marriage, which is physical, mental, and spiritual, is coming. So we begin to look at that. And these inner states, that's part of the conjunctio in alchemy. These inner states, when there's a perfect balance between the masculine and the feminine principles, and a union is happening. So it is also this feeling that, wow, suddenly, it makes sense. Everything is good as it can possibly be. And all things are illumined gold and show themselves truly revealed by the great light of the sun. And your own garden is as lovely as it could be. And the gold in the symbolism, in the world of symbolism, gold is, with the true consciousness. When we get gold, Robert Johnson wrote a great book, about getting your gold back. We give our gold to people. No, they're the one that are special. No, I don't know anything. Get that gold back. Use the Sun card to get your golden projections back. Because the gold and the shining of the sun and the divine children that are within the image, these are all encoded. And that this also represents that the divine light of the cosmos is integrated in your being. And it's forever and it's always. The darkness is temporary, and there's a whole lot of darkness. And the movements of the body, a transition. So when you're reborn through singleness of mind, see, that's when there's no conflict. There's no doubt. And that's why faith is so important. We don't have any doubt in this faith. The opposite of faith is fear. So when we're fearful, we're malnourished. We're violating the principles of faith. And even if you don't know what faith is, choose faith as opposed to fear. Your psyche knows. you don't know. You know, human beings are hilarious because we always want to know or understand the answer before we even know what the question is, or we want the answer like we can really apply it wisely. And part of the journey of the Tarot, of the 22 major arcana, is a symbolic teaching of the stages that it takes for consciousness. Because we're all between here and eternity someplace beyond heaven and hell. So when we're reborn through this oneness, or at one with, what begins to happen, we see as never before. Like, wow, I never saw that before, or I never saw it in that way. So the Sun card brings a kind of a balance to our lives. And if you don't have enough balance, you don't have enough Sun, this is a good card to be walking around with, or looking at, or saying, okay, I'm going to try this on, or I'm going to see. In the Jungian work, there are people who are specifically trained to do sand play. So there's this big square box, and it's got sand in it, and you give the client, all these little different images and people and houses and all sorts of stuff, and basically they play, and there is no judgment. And it's interesting because sometimes it's almost as if the person does create a kind of a tarot card, and then as we are in the act of playing, by having the experience, then we experience the eternal child who reaches and knows all that it knows through this act of play, through the hard work of play. So that's another way that people get in touch, because hidden within the Sun card, all right, is two children, a boy and a girl. Those are the children within. Those are the ones that they know that in a spark there's this eternal flame. And children know what that is. They're very, very connected. In Bali, an infant doesn't touch the ground till they're 6 months old, because they're considered holy, which is kind of cool. So this journey to home, and it's the home of the eternal soul. It is the home. It's the true home. So beneath the sun, the divine marriage is taking place. And that marriage is overseen by archangels, usually Gabriel. And it's an exalted marriage, so it's not a literal marriage. Although, one of the ways you could look at the sun card is say, I really need to experience this state of union, of the divine marriage, so I know what I'm really going for. And to learn not to burden human love with these profound, spiritual, holy images. Because human love, we can't maintain that state in a human relationship. We usually marry our inferior function and then drive one another crazy until we accept, like, oh, I get it. This is where my blind spot is, and this person lives from that blind spot. So, of course, it's annoying. It's annoying because we can't, we know, kind of know, but we can't get to it. Or we think there's something wrong with the blind spot, our blind spot, or our inferior function, because it's inferior. That doesn't mean that we don't have it. We're just not familiar with it. It's like if you're right-handed and then for some reason you got to use your left hand, you're not feeling good about it. So that's part of what this card is about, too, is the union of all the different functions. So when you are working with the creative process, which actually some of the greatest scientists and poets, writers and artists, and certainly Carl Jung, they came across their most profound words or ideas or images through an act of play. When Jung separated, had the break with Freud, he literally went and played in the sand for 2 years. And working with those images, playing with that, he also came up with the concept of the four functions, and he really went in and down and through, and that childlike wonder, but also absolutely being comfortable with not knowing, because the universe is so big. Children trust. It's instinctive. And they symbolize the natural self, which is why we love to be around them. So the psychology of the child archetype is a very powerful one. And that's part of what the Sun card is about. So there's another way to activate the eternal child, which embraces many, many opposites. So with this Sun card, we begin to recognize sometimes what we're missing. Sometimes, like, I don't have enough sunshine. You meet people who are just pure sunshine. It's like, wow, just good-natured, just happy with what is, and contribute to so many people's lives just by their nature. So the Sun can also be this, just a spark. It could be a tremendous spiritual illumination that's embodied. It's like the hit. It's like, wow, and it's the mind needs to learn compassionate love for the body, because in the Sun card, the body and the soul are represented as equals, and each reaching out to the other in a gesture of compassionate love. So when people are addicted to perfection, which very often comes out in food addictions, oh God, they are so mean to themselves. It really, because the addiction to perfection says if you're not perfect, just die, just roll up and die, which is, talk about the devil and the Antichrist to the child who represents all possibilities. We can have a sense of who these beings are, but what are they going to do with their lives? What are they here for? Now, also, we need to be careful, because in alchemy, there's always warnings. And these steps don't happen in chronological order. You can have different stages at different times. But psyche is always working on them. Your soul is always working. So you are insouled, just like the archetype of Venus. You are within that archetype, and that archetype, that divine principle, is within you. It's making it conscious. And one of the ways that we make it conscious is, like, we need to, chill on our opinions. Because opinions, it's hearsay. Or something is factual. A fact is a fact, and it's the end of the story. Bye-bye. Ta-ta. There's no more imagination going on with a fact. So when we're working in these realms of imagination, which is how we first get a sense of the holiness, the potential that's in all of us. So the sun card, which is the number 19, reduces to 1. And 1 is one of what they call the seed cards, which signals the end of one phase of development and begins a new one. So you can also use this image, let's say when you're in transition. It's like, oh no, something's happening here. Nothing is working as it once did, and now I need to be still and kind of wait so we can, or when we go into one of the swampland states of the soul, like a depression, right? That always, if we can just write a note on our arm or something, that, okay, that depressed state is heralding in, it's a call. There's about to be a change. And psyche pushes us down into kind of the dark waters to make that transition, because we can't make it in light. We don't have the consciousness, the awareness. So that's part of what happens in these different states. They have great soul meaning. And if we can understand, like, oh, that's what that really means. It doesn't make it any easier. It's just as painful. But you can begin to recognize that the soul is a dangerous thing. It's a wild thing. It's not interested in being good. You know, religion wants to control you that way. Well, if you're not good, that means you're bad. And if you're bad, you're going to hell. Now, is there a hell? Probably, but I don't think anybody's in it. And once we realize that, we can begin to recognize that that's the journey. That is the first half of life, or the first adulthood, is for the development of the ego and being in the world and doing all this. And the second half is totally about psyche and soul and the unconscious, and preparation for leaving the planet, which takes many, many, many years. So when we are working with this sun card, we are affirming the sun will rise. The moment of light is dawning. It's the illumination. It's the explanation for the experience. And it's like a glimpse of illumination, which is probably all we can really handle. And sometimes you can, I work with my dreams. That's my form of meditation. And when you can have a dream and it's so intense, and then you go to write it down. It's like, okay. Doesn't have the impact of the emotional journey you just went through, but you still write it down. And then years later, let's say there's a transit that's going on in the heavens, and you can look back at that date of that week and go like, oh my God, it proves that psyche is doing the weaving. There it is, symbolically. So the language of symbolism is the language of within. And what happens with this shining center is we get to recognize, oh, see, that's what understanding is. It's after we've gone through the process, after we've thrown away our cherished opinions and our beliefs, and we know, God, I am in some strange and enchanted land that can be pretty scary, or I am connected with nature, true nature, the raw, dark forces. And dark doesn't mean negative. It's just you just can't see. So only the symbolic life can express the needs of the soul. the daily needs of the soul, mind you. And we're there's constantly symbols around, or people will see them as signs, or synchronicities, or meaningful coincidences, or, being able to pay attention to what's really happening. When I was in esoteric training, I trained for 7 years. Right? My spiritual teacher would send me out, on kind of a mission. So I'd be like, I'm on a mission, and no idea what the hell I was doing. And then, I'd come back and I got the, candle or whatever it was. So she set me out the task. I love tasks. I love tasks. There's just something about a task that just gets me moving. And so then she'd ask me, so what happened along the way? I'd say, well, this happened, and then I noticed this, and then I noticed that. And that was the true experience. Just those little things I noticed were, in a sense, creating this tarot card, this living images. And then she would explain what was going on. Let's say I passed a street person or a beggar, and I'd give them $1, all right? And then she'd say, well, what way were they facing? I was like, oh, God, I don't know. So it's like, no, you don't give beggars money if they're facing north, because it makes it more complicated. They can't receive the good. So it's like, oh, man, so I got to run around. Which also makes you conscious. Like, wow, I can't just arbitrarily just give. I have to know what I'm doing. That's how important it is. It's so sacred. And, people now, they would just walk on the street. They walk like those, that little, the cell phone. They're going around and around and around. And it's so sad. I was on the train last week. I was going up to upstate, and 99% of the people in the train were looking at their cell phones. Nobody was talking to anybody. Nobody was having or even flirting or checking one of this outfit out. There was no Venus. She doesn't like that. She wants that communication. She wants that divine force of Eros. So when we're working with the Sun card, we also need to ask ourselves, do you truly love the other within yourself? And if you don't, time to start. And it's starting by just having the compassion for that wounded other that you don't love, but you put that burden on everybody else to love you. Well, he doesn't love me. Well, you don't love you. So how is he going to pick up loving you? All right? We need to be able to look and understand, that the part of this, actually it's the sun and the moon, but, in the Sun card, that is the union of the opposites, the two opposing forces within ourselves that we love, because that's the complete story. We wouldn't love a film or a great work of literature if it wasn't protagonist. If everything was good, it'd be like, put this down, this is boring, right? So with the Sun card, you need to be able to say, wow. Instead of projecting that divine child and those golden parts and projecting it onto others, so when a projection fails, it comes back to you, and then we got to work with it. And so the way that the child looks at you, they bless you. And so that inner child blesses you. And that's what we want to be working with, that beloved blessing. So may your week be blessed and your life be blessed. There will be no transmission. I was going to say, well, I guess it is a form of transmission. Show next week. I'm going to take some time off. And in the meantime, just work with that wonderful energy. And give up the cliches. They're not the thing you really think. There is a divinity in you that longs to be loved by you, but here on earth. That's what heaven on earth is. So the task is to work your way through and find the will of God in your circumstances over which you have no control. And that's what it's about. And it's about lots of other things. So may Venus bless you and cause great joy in your life. And talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.